All right, folks, I'd like to welcome you here again today. My name is Jeff Scarlatta, and we have another interesting call here. As always, we have retired U.S. Marshal Mr. Charlie Moore on the call, and we got some other people as well throughout the country. So, Charlie, this is going to be an exciting call. We're kind of following up on the Ahmaud Arbery case. The verdict came down over what happened with them, and I think that this is just, it's an interesting situation. I'll tell you, we kind of called it, mainly you kind of called it from the beginning, but the case really isn't over. Even with the verdict, there's still the federal charges and everything going on. So before we get rolling, Charlie, is there anything you want to add to this, or are we ready to go with it?
No, I think we're ready to go, Jeff. Thanks again for having me. I know we got some clips that we're going to show to lay the foundation for those that attended before to see where we started. Some of you remember the call Jeff did before the trial. Then we've got a clip, I believe, Jeff, about the verdict. And then we'll speak a little bit about that, ask any or answer any questions we have, the sentencing schedule and the appeals process, if any. I hear there is going to be some. And then what the federal charges are and why there can be, and maybe some folks have some questions on that, maybe even a double pre-question or thing like that. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, we're glad to have you part of it here. So, all right, so we're going to start first with the video of the timeline, exactly what happened, because I think that as we talk about the verdict and why it was decided the way it was decided, I think it's going to be important for people to have that fresh video in their mind of like what actually happened on the day of the course. So let's get this going. I'm going to play a video here, so be patient with me while I figure out how to share my screen again. All right, so the first one we are going to do is going to be retracing the steps of the actual case and what happened with that. Everybody can see that, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. And then, Charlie, if the sound does not come out, please let me know that as well, too.
25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery was shot dead in the South Georgia neighborhood of Satilla Shores. In the 2 months that followed, no arrests were made. But local residents and lawmakers protested what they said was a deadly combination of racial profiling and flawed self-defense laws.
When they stop you, make sure you got your cameras on. Make sure you got a video.
Police did eventually arrest 2 suspects, but it was days after this video of the fatal shooting emerged. Gregory McMichael and his son Travis were charged with murder and aggravated assault.
No justice, no peace.
The case has reignited the national debate over racial violence.
I'm sure you saw the news about Ahmaud Arbery.
It looks like murder.
The American public saw the video.
What exactly happened in the last moments of Mr. Arbery's life? Using security camera footage, cell phone video, and 911 calls and logs, the Times has reconstructed the critical 12 minutes from when Mr. Arbery appeared on Satilla Drive to his death less than 300 yards away. It's around 1 p.m. on February 23rd when Ahmaud Arbery is out, less than 2 miles from his home. A security camera at 219 Satilla Drive is recording when Mr. Arbery enters the frame at around 1:04 p.m. He may have been jogging in the area, but he stops on the front lawn of 220 Satilla, a house being built across the street. Arbery glances around and wanders into the open construction site. Inside, security footage briefly captures him looking around. Meanwhile, outside, a neighbour walks from Jones Road towards Satilla Drive and calls 911.
There's a guy in the house right now. The house under construction. 219 or 220 Satilla Drive.
The neighbour waits by the street corner. He will later tell the dispatcher that Arbery resembles a recent trespasser in the area.
He's been caught on the camera a bunch before at night. It's kind of an ongoing thing out here. Black guy, white t-shirt.
On multiple occasions before February 23rd, several trespassers were caught on camera at 220 Satilla. The owner routinely alerted the police. On 4 occasions, what appears to be the same man was filmed. It's unclear if this was Arbery, but even if it were, this does not justify his shooting by neighbours outside on the street. The site's owner says nothing was ever stolen from the house during these incidents, or on February 23rd, and no property was ever damaged. But neighbours were aware of the trespasses, and the community was on alert. Now, back to the day in question. It's 1:08 p.m. and Arbery is walking around inside the house. 4 minutes after he entered, he walks out and runs off.
He's running right now. There he goes right now.
Okay, what is he doing?
He's running down the street.
In the top corner of the security footage, we can see down the street to 230 Satilla, the home of Travis McMichael. At 1:10 p.m, Travis and his father Gregory grab their guns, jump in a white truck and leave the house to pursue Mr. Arbery. We don't have footage showing the next 3 minutes, but testimony Gregory McMichael gave police at the scene and interviews by another witness, Roddy Bryan, indicate what happened. Gregory and Travis McMichael follow Arbery onto Burford Road. Their neighbour, Roddy Bryan, sees the pursuit, gets in his car and follows. The McMichaels try to cut Arbery off. Arbery doubles back and passes them. Bryan tries to block Arbery, but Arbery runs past him and toward Holmes Road. Gregory McMichael climbs from the cab to the bed of the truck, armed with a handgun. We don't know exactly what happens next, but Bryan and the McMichaels end up following Arbery on Holmes Road, and we next see Arbery at 1:14 p.m. running back down Holmes Road, away from Roddy Bryan and towards the McMichaels. Roddy Bryan is filming, and a warning, these scenes are distressing. Gregory McMichael dials 911 at this time.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
Satilla, where at Satilla Shores?
I don't know what street we're on. Stop right there! Is it? Stop! Travis!
Sir, hello, sir.
Let's watch this back and break down what happens. This is Arbery. He has been running from the vehicles for almost 4 minutes. Travis is standing by the driver's side of the truck, armed with a shotgun. Gregory is in the bed of the truck on the 911 call. Arbery doesn't know where to run. He veers right, then left, and then darts around the right side of the vehicle. Arbery comes around the front of the truck. We see his white t-shirt through the windshield. And here is Travis, now leaning toward him. This is the instant the first shot is fired. Arbery is hit in the chest, his right lung, ribs and sternum are injured. The two men wrestle over the gun. Gregory shouts.
Travis!
Arbery punches Travis. In the back of the truck, Gregory drops the cell phone. A second blast goes off, out of frame, but we see the shotgun smoke here. Arbery is heavily bleeding. He throws another punch. Travis fires a final shot, which hits Arbery in his left upper chest. Travis walks away, holding his gun. Gregory gets off the truck, clutching his .357 Magnum. According to the police report, Gregory rolled Arbery over to see if he had a weapon. He did not. Police officers arrive within seconds of the shooting. And a minute or so later, at 1:16 p.m, police officer Orr Minshew reports 2 subjects on Holmes Road, shots fired, male on ground, bleeding out. The police took Gregory McMichael's testimony and let the 2 men go. But now the McMichaels both face serious charges.
All right, so there's one video. Now let's go to the other video, which was the actual verdict. That's the one you want next, right, Charlie?
Yeah, if you scroll it up, Jeff, to maybe, I don't know if you watched it. I think it's like 2 minutes or something, because he's gonna let the jury come in and that kind of thing. I mean, maybe you can scroll, right about there, I think, because they're all standing to hear the verdict. So
okay, let's take it from here.
Thank you, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Madam Foreperson, I understand you have reached a verdict as to each defendant.
We have.
If you could please hand your verdict forms to the sheriff. I'm going to go ahead and address each one of these verdict forms separately. The first verdict form I have is the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael. Mr. McMichael, please stand. Verdict is as follows. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, case number CR 000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. I'm going to ask that whoever just made an outburst be removed from the court, please. As this court has indicated, I ask that there be no outbursts in the court, and I expect as much from the gallery. Please respect the court's desire for this as we move forward. If you feel like you need to make a comment or otherwise demonstrate with respect to the verdict, I do ask that you step out of the courtroom now. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty. Dated this 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. Have a seat. As to Gregory McMichael. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, the State of Georgia versus Greg McMichael, case number CR 20000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant, Greg McMichael, guilty. This 24th day of November, 2021, signed by the foreperson. As to William R. Bryan. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, State of Georgia versus William R. Bryan, case number CR 20000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, not guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, William R. Bryan, guilty. Count 6, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan not guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 8, false imprisonment. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony. We, the jury, find the defendant William R. Bryan guilty. Signed this 24th day of November by the foreperson.
So I'm going to stop that there, unless there was more to that you needed to see, Charlie, but I think we all kind of know that. And I know many people have already seen that verdict come down if you've been following the case at all. However, I wanted to kind of show it because we're going to be posting this on our page. And if we go back, 6 years from now, 5 years from now, I want to be able to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about, we've seen in there. So Charlie, let's talk about the case, the charges a little bit. Are we ready for the indictment form you sent me, or do you want to talk about the charges first?
Whichever's easiest for you, Jeff. The state indictment, as we talked about, I forget when our first call was on this, when I kind of took everything that we were, that was out there and put it together and what would you say? Predict, I guess, if you want to use that word, what was going to happen. Is obviously Mr. Bryan got convicted on 6 out of the 9. The ones that he wasn't convicted on have to do with the firearm, the aggravated assault, pointing a firearm, and this goes to self-defense, goes to civilians, it goes to everything that we've been trying to teach, through Beyond the Range and our respective businesses, is pointing a weapon at someone is a crime. Whether you think you're making a citizen's arrest or you're trying to get your parking spot back. Obviously, Mr. Bryan didn't have a firearm, so he couldn't be charged and convicted with the felony counts that have to do with that, as well as the malice that Travis was the only one convicted of that one, which is basically having an evil heart, if you will, when he killed Mr. Arbery. So, if you want to post that, that's basically what the 9 counts are. If people want to take a look at what the indictment looks like, if they haven't seen one, and then we can either answer questions on that, talk about the sentencing. The prosecutor's already come out and spoken about what she's going to ask.
Number 11. You have heard the verdicts read.
Oh, I got my other thing playing. Hold on one second.
I hear the judge back there.
Okay, I got rid of the judge.
Don't do that. This is the federal indictment. Do you have the other one, Jeff, or no?
That one?
Yeah, the second. There you go. That's the state indictment. That's the charges we just saw. If Jeff can scroll up a little bit. I don't know how to do that. Okay. So those are the jurors and the 4 persons from the indictment. Okay, count 1. If you can scroll back down, Jeff, I'm sorry. Back to the beginning, keep going. Right there. You can make it larger. Underneath Mr. Bryan's name are the counts and the things that they were charged with.
I don't know if I can make it bigger or not.
That's fine. I can see it. I think most people can. Malice murder is the murder with a, depraved indifference. Thank you, sir. Depraved indifference. You've heard it called in other states. Basically, you have an evil heart that you, felony murder. One of those counts is to do with the firearms and aggravated assault. The other counts have to do with the commission of false imprisonment. So each felony murder, people will look at it and go, why? He only killed 1 person. Why all the murder charges? Well, obviously, malice murder is different. Each felony murder per person has to do with the underlying charge: aggravated assault, murder, false imprisonment, and the other charges. So that's why there's 4 of them in there. And each person was charged because Georgia, like many states, if all 3 of us, Bev, you and I, are out committing a crime, and I'm the getaway driver, and I'm the watch person, and Bev goes in and robs a bank and kills 7 people, we're all going to be lumped into just as we pulled the trigger. And that's kind of what the prosecutor, Ms. Donikowski, said in her closing and in her testimony. Some not funny parallels, but you saw in this case, if you didn't see it, testifying and then trying to change your stories. She didn't have a couple good things to say about how it was investigated. In my opinion, I've seen the body cam video. You can't show up and say he's on the ground and he's almost dead, basically, to paraphrase, without doing anything. It doesn't look good. You can't let witnesses and possible suspects wander around talking to each other. Those are witnesses that should have been separated. That's basic 101. And she mentioned that in her closing. When you talk about Travis, his testimony was poor at best. He tried to use big words from his Coast Guard thing, his law enforcement thing. Both of them are two separate things, have nothing really to do with each other. And I think it bit him in the butt, obviously. But you look at, he had to testify. If you're going to claim self-defense, you don't have to testify. We all know about our Fifth Amendment privilege and our right under the Fifth Amendment. However, to claim self-defense and not let the jury hear from you, it doesn't look good. If you look at the Rittenhouse case, same thing. He had to testify. And then if you look at the Jussie Smollett case that's going on now in Chicago, he had to testify. It doesn't look well if you don't testify. So heaven forbid you're involved in a self-defense case, articulation, I don't know how many times we have to say it, whether you're in law enforcement or a civilian been involved in a use of force incident, especially deadly or lethal force. You have to learn how to state facts, such as, it's nothing wrong with saying I'm in fear of my life, but give me facts and paint a picture for me of what caused you to say I'm in fear of my life. What are you feeling? What are you seeing? What's going on? And in layman's terms, police are terrible about layman's terms. Just tell people, spell it out to Jeff, who wasn't there, why you felt like you did. Using cliches, I say it quite often, isn't a defense, and it's not articulation. So that's basically the case. The prosecutor is looking for Travis and Gregory McMichael, life without parole plus 35 years. And for Mr. Bryant, life without parole plus 15 years. They add those things on at the end for those that don't follow criminal cases and things. In case there's one of those, the life sentence goes with the felony murders. If those are overturned for some reason, you have the plus 35 to back those up. This case is a little bit different than many, many cases that do that. Is we now have a federal trial coming up with jury selection slated for February of next year shortly. So that's kind of that case now. They are doing some appeals. One of them is on change of venue. I'm not sure who asked and didn't ask. One of them is on the jury selection and who shouldn't have been on and not on. And you have to see where those goes in the appellate process. So that's kind of where we're at down here. They are in jail, obviously, pending sentence. And if they had been acquitted, which in my opinion wasn't going to happen, they would have been arrested or taken into custody by the U.S. Marshals anyways, because they've been held on the federal charges. So they weren't getting out anyways. So it's kind of a lose-lose for them.
All right, now, Charlie, I scrolled down on that indictment thing that you sent me.
Yes, sir.
Paper. So here on count one, they're kind of explaining a little bit about the malice murder charge. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
All right. And same thing with count two. They're talking about the felony murder.
Yeah, if you go down where it says the felony murder has to be, and in each state, as you know, for you up in New York, is different. Felony murder is murder caused while in commission of a felony. The felony in count two is aggravated assault, as alleged in count 6 of the indictment. So you notice if once they found them guilty of this, they would have, by supposition, you would have to say they were going to be guilty of count 6, or they couldn't have charged them with this count. So, and then if you scroll down further to count 3, you'll notice it was in the commission again of another aggravated assault using the vehicles instead of the shotgun, and the handgun. And that is in count 7. So if anybody was convicted of this, they would have been convicted in count 7 as well. Count 4, again, is felony murder, I believe, without having it in front of me. In commission,
There it is.
There it is. Of false imprisonment, basically using their vehicles to not allow him to leave. And those that watch the trial and those that, like myself, that find this legal, law enforcement stuff very, very interesting. You can't, when Travis was on the stand, Mr. McMichael, the younger, say, I saw him a few weeks ago and he looked to be reaching into his waistband and I was so scared that I called my father and waited for the police because I didn't want to go in there. And then a few weeks later, you weren't afraid of him. He was no threat and you chased him around your neighborhood. So you can't have it both ways. Either you're so scared of the person you don't want to go near him, or you wanted to try to do something else. And like I said, he didn't do a very good job, or he didn't do himself very good when he testified, because it just was poor at best, and understandably so.
And then count 5 is also false imprisonment.
Correct, which is count 9. So 5 goes to 9.
Okay.
6 refers back to what we talked about as the charge of aggravated assault using the 12-gauge shotgun as referenced there in the count. Count 7 is the next one up.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Here we go.
That's all right. Let's see. There he is. Where'd he go? Count 7 is for the Silverado pickup and an F-150 pickup, as you can see in the indictment itself.
Oh, yeah, because it says it right here. Yep.
And then count 8 is a false imprisonment with, again, the Silverado and a different. If you go back and you notice, you go, wait, it says the same thing. One of them is trying to maintain or corral him, if you will, on Holmes Drive. If you go back up, and you'll notice it's on a, it doesn't reference the thing. So now it's just in general.
Right, that's a general one. This is more specific one.
Count 8 is where they finally got him stopped on Holmes Road where the homicide took place. So you're going, isn't that one thing? Well, each one is a separate kind of event and a charge. So I think the prosecutors, some of us may go, they overcharged them. Well, they did enough to get a conviction of with 12 people in the jury. And, they did, I think they did a good job putting the things together that we had discussed a year ago or so. And then I think count 9 was the last count in the indictment, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So these kind of go through. Do we want to pop up the other one or not yet?
We can pop it out. I don't know if there's any questions. I mean, this is kind of a quote unquote done deal as far as the state until we get to any appellates or any the sentencing, which would be the next thing. And then somebody will appeal the sentence, I'm sure. Or I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure, because that's generally what happens. And then talk about the federal charges and why.
Okay. So I want to just help some of our viewers understand this. So obviously there's different counts that are kind of confusing. Like, I followed the case until the trial. I hate to say that. And then during the trial, I kind of got busy, and also the verdict comes down, and I was getting confused, felony murder. I'm like, wait a second. They only shot one person, but why is there 4 felony murder charges? And then looking at that indictment that you just said and how you explained it makes it more understandable that the lower counts affect the upper counts of felony murder, because obviously somebody died. But they're kind of throwing every charge that they can at them. One of them is using the pickup truck. One of them, false imprisonment with a pickup truck. One of them is false imprisonment with a weapon, trying to do different things. So any time that somebody's going to be charged, it's not just that one basic charge. They're going to throw as many charges at you as they can. Is that kind of correct on that?
Well, I think it looks like that, obviously, and I don't think your assessment is wrong. It's just that prosecutors generally don't like to lose, just like none of us do, and they are obligated by canons and regulations not to bring charges that they can't substantiate beyond a reasonable doubt. So obviously, when they charged these folks in the indictment, they had enough evidence to believe that it could convince 12 people, right, in the county of Glenn down here, that the folks charged did what they said they did. And obviously that was the case for the majority. Mr. McMichael, the older, obviously didn't pull the trigger, and the jury didn't find enough there. And I think that's a good job by them, is to go through each count and weigh and consider everything that was presented. So and then Mr. Bryant was 6 out of 9 because he didn't really have a gun or have anything to do with that aspect of the case.
So Travis, the one who pulled the trigger, got the malice murder charge, probably because, basically in layman terms, because he pulled the trigger.
Yeah, and there's some other things. There's some things excluded that will come out. Those of us that followed the trial more in depth, as far as post-event statements, There was a little bit about text messages and Facebook's posts.
Right.
The hate crimes that are going to come out will bring everything out. Like we mentioned in our first case, if folks either here in Glenn County or around the, the listening, our subscribers, don't believe that the government especially will pull everything, including the satellite video or satellite images that they used in this case, as well as in the Rittenhouse case to position things. There's a reason that the United States government has a 90-some-odd% conviction rate, is because it's the government and they have a tremendous amount of resources and good prosecutors and investigators, to be honest. So when we get into that, it looks like they're throwing everything there, but they're obligated not to just charge to charge if they can't prove it, especially in a case of this magnitude getting national attention. And I'm sure that the folks on the receiving end thought it was overkill, if you will. But obviously they substantiated that with evidence and in the law. And obviously the jury that they selected agreed with them for the most part.
Okay. So, I don't know if that was actually my question, but that was a good explanation on that. No, that's okay.
I don't know
because I've had somebody ask this. I've had somebody ask this question before, and I just want to kind of get your thoughts on why was Travis charged with malice murder and the other two were not?
Well, when they, to go back through all the evidence, if you remember, and I just spoke to someone else about this, the video that Jeff just showed is when you say I was scared and you say I acted this way, people do relatively similar things after they've been in a traumatic event. If you recall, if you were on our first call, or if Jeff has posted it again, when he's done with the shooting, when the shooting is over and Mr. Arbery falls to the ground, he doesn't look scared. He turns around like he's accomplished what he was going to do. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have in his mind that he believed, and maybe he did, that he was in the right, but it's not what the body language showed. And then you have to say, once you shot him once, it's a Remington pump action shotgun. It's not like you have a semi-auto, it just keeps going off until the magazine.
Right.
Is you have to rack it again and then rack it again. So you have intent, which is easily proved. And the blows he was allegedly getting hit in the head didn't look like they were that strong to me, especially when you got shot through the wrist and you're bleeding out from a chest wound. So malice murder, again, when you read the indictment and read the law, is with an evil heart or evil intent. And I think it's the right charge. And I think I mentioned that in our first video, is it doesn't look right. I'm not saying he didn't believe it. It doesn't look right. And obviously the jury didn't believe him. And then again, he allegedly made some statements after the fact that will come out in the federal trial that we're going to speak about. And some of the folks know about it. So, and sadly, as we predicted way back when, is I think, for these families, one, we have a deceased person, and two, we have two, maybe three gentlemen now that will never be outside of the prison until they've lived their lives in the free world, if you want to use that kind of language. Sadly, for a decision, and what Ms. Donikowski, the lead prosecutor, said was for a decision that took place in a driveway. They made a decision to go, and again, I said it in the first video, they wanted to be the neighborhood heroes who found the kid that was walking in, and I don't believe he was out jogging either. And it doesn't matter. He had no implement or no describable or articulable facts to lead them to believe at that present time he was in imminent danger of serious bodily injury or death to them at all. You can't chase someone around and then when the guy says, look, I'm done running, I'm going to try to grab the gun, and then claim self-defense. You've been chasing him. What'd you think he was going to do? Well, he should have sat down. Well, that's what you would have done. You can't tell me I haven't done that. As we said in the first video, you can resist the citizen's arrest. You cannot resist a law enforcement arrest. So in Georgia has changed that, but sadly in this case, it was a retroactive thing, a little too late for that.
All right, so before we talk about federal charges possible, let's open up the questions. If anybody has a question, you'll need to unmute yourself. I'm kind of looking at the screen to see if anybody pops on there. So I'm not seeing anybody with any questions. Going once. I know, Charlie, you must have explained it right if nobody's asking questions. All right, let's move forward to possible federal charges. Charlie, what's coming next for these guys?
Well, All right. Well, they're not possible because the one, could you pop up that indictment again, please? The federal one?
Sure.
I believe it is a 5-count indictment, including a forfeiture count. There we go. Look at that. Bingo. All right. All right. And again, what you find out in the indictment, which is basically a panel of, if you guys don't know, at least in the federal system, 23 up to 23 people, 16 have to vote to convict or vote for a true bill, they call it in the indictment. The federal crime is a 5-count indictment, and the first count Jeff has up there is against the Travis and Gregory McMichael. It is 18 USC, meaning United States Code, section, they'll say 245 B2B and 2, which is basically a hate crime. That is a hate crime that they interfered. If you read it where it says did willfully by force and threat of force injure, intimidate, or interfere with Ahmaud Arbery, an African-American man, quote unquote, the protected class, thus the hate crime, because of Arbery's race and color. And he was enjoying a facility provided by and administered by the state and a subdivision thereof. Basically,
I don't know what happened there. Hold on, Charlie.
I don't know. Basically, the roadways of Satilla Shores. And because of his race, they deprived him of his rights, is basically what the government's saying. If you read it where Jeff brought it back. So basically, because he was running on a public street, they armed themselves, if you can scroll up a little bit, with firearms in a pickup truck and chased him through the public streets, yelling at him, using their truck to cut off his route and threatening with firearms. Now, in layman's terms, that's exactly what they did. And that's what they used, and it resulted in his death. So this case, one, there will be no cameras, there will be no film, there will be no anything. They'll have a sketch artist if the judge approves it. You'll see it run quite differently than the state case. The Southern District of Georgia covers way up above Savannah and all the way west of Waycross. So you'll have a bigger jury pool. They've already sent out, I know, Jeff, you and I talked about this. The length of the jury selection was quite lengthy for the state trial. They've already sent out questionnaires, answered under penalty of perjury, blah, 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 that, let's get rid of people right away that are definitely not going to make the cut for the jury. So we don't bring people in and have people come up and say, yeah, I think he's already guilty. And then you've wasted, 15, 20 minutes or more. So that's the hate crime. The second one is on Mr. Bryant. Obviously the same thing, that he chased him in his truck, depriving him basically of his rights to be on the free streets of Satilla Shores. And that's the count that Jeff has up there. Because of his race, that being an African-American man. You will see in this trial, or you will read anyways, some of the text messages, some of the alleged text messages, Facebook posts, phone calls, jail calls that I don't know why anybody's talking on a phone in jail. Everybody knows they're recorded, but satellite imagery, if they have it, this is where all those things will come out. Witness statements. Mr. Bryant, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to take a plea. They're all looking at a possible life prison sentence. There is no parole in the federal system. So if they give you life, that's all you're going to get. Do as much as you can. Somebody, in my experience, looks to take a plea and testify against somebody else because it's quite a substantial penalty. The next count is count 3, I believe, which is the attempted kidnapping charge, which is 18 USC 1201 A1 D and 2. The kidnapping charge has a maximum penalty of 20 years. And basically it's saying the same thing, that they tried to use the thing that you'll need for a federal charge. And when Jeff said, hey, they just gonna pile it on, if you will, you're wondering why it's different than the false imprisonment of the state. The actions are not, it's the same incident. If you read right below where it says for a purpose and benefit, and in committing and in furtherance of the commission of the offense, used an instrumentality of interstate commerce. That is the federal nexus to charge them federally. You used a truck that was not made in the state of Georgia. Thus, it is a instrumentality of interstate commerce, thus making it a federal crime. Many gun cases are done that way. The gun was made at Smith & Wesson in Springfield, Massachusetts, used in a murder in Illinois. It had to go through interstate commerce to get there. Thus, we have a federal nexus to charge you with that crime. And again, if you read down, it says in the case of McMichael's, firearms were used to restrain him, restrict his movement, corral and detain him. And basically, Mr. McMichael, the elder, said something in his post-arrest statement about corralling him or caging him or boxing him in like a rat. I don't think that's going to come back and help him. And that's just my guess. But you can see that they focus this one on the instrumentality of interstate commerce, a truck driven by Travis McMichael, and a truck driven by Mr. Bryan. The penalty, again, as I mentioned to you, is up to 20 years. And again, there is no parole. So if they give you 19 years, that's 19 years minus a little bit of good time. And finally, I believe count 4 and 5 are the firearms. Count 4 is a charge on Travis McMichael. And the difference is this is a 10-year mandatory minimum penalty. So if they give him life for the hate crime, I'm just speculating, obviously, and he gets convicted of this one, the judge has no choice other than to give him 10 mandatory minimum of 10 years for brandishing and discharging a firearm during the commission.
So that's where a lifetime sentence plus 10 years comes in play?
Mandatory minimum. He can run them consecutive. I think I'd have to research the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. He can't give them less than 10. Let's just say they got the max on everything. They could give them life in prison, 20 years for count 2 and 3, and then mandatory 10 on top of it. So it's a lengthy sentence any way you look at it. Yeah, this one is because they used the crime of violence in, you'll see where they reference count 1 in those crimes. That so you can't, it's not just possessing the weapon, it's using it in a crime of violence, which is the hate crime that resulted in the death. Kind of like the Georgia case where they had, count 3 reference count 6.
Right.
Paraphrasing. This one, you'll notice he has a 7-year mandatory minimum. Based on my research, because he didn't discharge the firearm, he just brandished it. So Greg McMichael stood in the back of the car with a weapon, the .357 revolver, which was used in the commission of a crime, in this case, the hate crime. He brandished it, he showed it, he used it for a tool of intimidation, if you will. Thus the charge here in count 5. The last count is a forfeiture count, seeking property and or money. Throw counts 3 to 5. They basically want to not only convict you, they want to take your weapons from you. It would say that real property and proceeds, anything, basically your weapons, if you sell a book, if you do movies, anything, any proceeds that you get because of this, the government's going to take the money. And that's a forfeiture count. The thing with a forfeiture count, most of them have a preponderance of the evidence thing. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's an easier burden to meet, to seize assets rather than, obviously to take someone's liberty away from them. So those are the federal charges. It's a 5-count indictment, excluding the forfeiture allegations, with major penalties. I mean, when you're looking at a state penalty, and then you're going to look at federal time, like I said, it's very rare that the feds will not get a conviction, whether by plea or by trial. So it's for a decision that you and I have talked about that was very, very rapidly made. You have lifelong implications. If you notice, Mr. Bryant tried to have a GoFundMe page that GoFundMe shut down because the massive amount of legal bills, not to even mention the emotional, physical, and personal turmoil that you're through because of a decision to come off the porch and help your neighbors chase somebody around and then allegedly use racial slurs. I'm not purporting to be perfect, but this is a different time. You cannot delete things. I tell my children, and I'm not trying to say anybody on here was a child, don't post anything, don't send anything, don't put cool things on your guns. I'm the Grim Reaper, step on my porch and you'll get this, which may be true. You might be the Grim Reaper, him or herself, but it won't do you any good to be put up in front of a jury with that. Now you may win, but you're going to pay a heavy toll to do that. Just, be honest, learn how to, to train, learn how to articulate facts of what you do and make solid decisions. That's why you train with Jeff. Hopefully you're coming to see me when I get around, and because these things are costly decisions that don't take long to make. And I just think that's our main thing is it's a very, very massive responsibility to use a firearm, especially.
But I think you just wrapped it up there. I was actually going to say, we always do these calls with our thought of lessons to be learned. It's not something that as an individual you can learn from your mistake, because in this case you learn from this mistake, it's costing you your life basically. So you have to learn from other people's mistakes, decisions, whatever you want to call them in this case. And in this one, our lessons to be learned, like you said, is watch who you agree to help, watch what you're doing, watch what's being posted out there. Sometimes if you're getting influence and you're going and all of a sudden you're committing a crime, now you're stuck in the middle of it. And for us, especially, if you're a gun owner, you leave your firearm somewhere and somebody grabs it, you can be accountable for. We have that current case that's going on now with that teenage shooting, which I think we're going to have to do a call on, Charlie.
I think that's it goes back to, not to change the topic, but the same kind of subject is, I have a teenager at home, and, you have a party and you have alcohol there, and, you let folks, especially teens, drive. All of a sudden, I'm getting sued, personally. And,
right.
The company that made my car is getting sued because some child left here and had an accident because we wanted to have a party. And I'm not saying don't have fun, but like Jeff said, it's a responsibility. And, those parents are, they're in jail now, and they'll probably not get out till after a trial. And, I don't know what kind of decision-making process they had, but it doesn't seem to be a solid, good one. Like Jeff said, be a responsible gun owner, not only training, but maintaining it and, securing it and things. It's just not worth it. There's too many consequences, on top of getting hurt,
And I think you always got to look at it as don't ever assume that somebody in your family won't grab that firearm. If I have grandkids that come to my house and my firearms are locked up, they don't even know where I keep them. But it's that I can't assume that even though I've trained them and I don't think they ever have an interest in firearms, who knows? And you want to make sure that you're safe with it. So, again, lessons to be learned is let's make sure that we're trying to make the right decisions at the right time, and understand that sometimes watch who you follow, because that person you follow could be bringing you into a bad situation.
Yeah. So, and just to make it, is the courts, I just got done with a law enforcement session about this. The courts, even with civilians, and I don't mean that in a bad way, don't expect perfection. They expect reasonableness. What would a reasonable person and or officer have done in the similar circumstances, knowing what you knew at the time? You can't add stuff afterwards. Hey, I found out Jeff had a whatever. Well, it doesn't matter if you didn't know it at the time. But it doesn't have to be perfect. There are no perfect decisions usually in use of force. But it's got to be reasonable. And, it can't be cliche based. It can't be, and that goes, we could just keep talking about lessons. If you're an instructor, don't be out there saying stuff that's off the wall. Because when Bev says, hey, Charlie said, if the guy was down, just walk back and shoot him in the back of the head. That is just paraphrasing. I never said that.
We have it on tape now.
Yeah, that's why I said it. So he can't get back up. That's crazy. But if something happens and she does something like that, she goes back and says, I said it. Now I have what they call vicarious liability. So massive responsibilities in use of force. And I know Bev knows that's a example and not true, but it's just be careful. You know, we're all responsible folks. Be reasonable, be careful, be safe. And like Jeff said, let's learn lessons from these kind of events. So heaven forbid we don't see anymore, especially involving anybody that follows us, you know, and shares our beliefs.
All right, let's open up to calls. Anybody have a question? Just unmute yourself and jump on in. Bev, you got a question there?
I
Go
have
ahead,
a question
Bev.
on the sentencing. They're going to be sentenced by Georgia. If they're found guilty for federal, do sentences run concurrently or consecutively, or how does that work if they're found guilty out of both lawsuits, or however you call it?
That's a good question. Out of both jurisdictions, yeah. Lots of them, and people wonder that aren't involved in it, like my family and I are, is what they will do is writ them, meaning writ of habeas corpus, meaning give me the body, and they will take them by writ to federal court and then return them, and that's what it's called, a return writ. So if it was Jeff, I'd pick him up in the Georgia State Prison, I don't even know where it is, take him to federal trial and then bring him back until he's done with his federal, you know, state sentence, and then he would come over to the federal system. Generally, I haven't seen many where the states run them concurrent or consecutive. I have seen it done. So it's usually, it'll be hard on this one because unless the federal government says, I will run it concurrent to the state, which they may, if they're both life without parole, there's no sense of, but they don't have to, just to ensure that if the federal, one of them gets overturned, that they're not. So it's just more of a legal strategy rather than
Okay.
And these are both high profile cases with national attention. So I can't say that doesn't factor in. I'm sure it does in some aspect. Not the law. The law is the law and the jury does what they do. But that's a great question. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it all depends on what the departments wanted to do, whether, you know, be the Justice Department or the prosecutor's office in Glenn County, for a better term, but the special prosecutors from Cobb County, I think they were from. So,
yeah. So one doesn't take precedence over the other then.
well, it's usually whoever grabs them first has ownership.
Okay.
I hate to say that, it's not ownership, but has possession.
Yeah.
So the state of Georgia arrested them first, charged them first, indicted them first. Now there's been cases where, you know, the state's going, hey, look, they're, you know, the feds have got a lot more money. Let's just let them go over there. But that's more of an agreement between the attorney generals and their departments.
Okay.
Who do what. So it's a lot of legal wrangling and things like that.
Yeah.
But they couldn't do it in the Georgia sentencing because they're going to have to sentence them before the federal trial is over. So they couldn't say, hey, let's wait until they're convicted federally, which they might not be. So,
right.
So that's a great question, though, Ms. Bev.
I like that one. That was a good one. All right. Any more questions out there? Looks like Laura's got a question. Laura, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So we have Charlie, we have a federal courthouse here, right?
Yes,
right, Charlie.
Yeah.
So will the federal case happen here in Brunswick, or is it going to happen somewhere else?
It can happen anywhere in the district, the Southern District of Georgia, which is Savannah, Waycross. I don't know every town, probably I'd have to look at the map, to be honest. I'm going to guess, I'm going to throw this out there, because of the size of the jury pool and just the national attention of the case, they may move it to Savannah, but it's still in the Southern District of Georgia, so it doesn't really matter. It's not like, you know, the crime happened in Brunswick, so it's got to be here. It's not like Glenn County is this big. You know, we got the whole Southern District of Georgia. It's this big. So I would venture a guess, because of the location, the media attention that it'll probably get. You know, we saw a few for the state case. That courthouse on Gloucester Street here is not located in a very easily accessible place. Plus, the post office is downstairs. I would think I might move it to Savannah, but that's just a guess. I haven't heard anything different other than.
And the high school's right across the street too. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just.
They would have to go virtual.
Yeah, no, they won't go virtual. You have a right to face your accusers. Very few trials are virtual. They do some hearings virtual, but.
No, I'm saying the high school would have to go virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But they'll be fine. I mean, it's going to be it'll be a lot. You'll see it run a lot different. You know, there is no, as I mentioned, no cameras, no film, no media. You know, they have to run back outside with their little notebooks. They have sketch artists. It's just run a little more strict. I think it'll flow easier, but I'm just going to guess and say it'll be in Savannah because of the size of it, but I might be wrong, but it wouldn't surprise me if it is.
All right. Any other questions out there? All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Charlie, as always, I appreciate your knowledge and expertise in digging in, finding out the information. This is going to be on our YouTube page as well, and I hope people share this with others. You know, this is an opportunity for everybody to learn, and you know, some people just want to know the basics. Don't tell me anything. I just want to know what started it, what the charges were, and tell me what I can learn. But I think when you really look at all the different aspects that we covered, this is a fourth call I think we did on this one particular case, and one of them we talked about all the different videos and then what happened with the body cams and all that as well. So we have a lot of information on this, and I just think that there's so many lessons to be learned in this. And I know we already have our next topic for our next call. We're gonna have to set that one up here and see when we can do that. But as always, Charlie, I appreciate your time and effort in this, and we look forward to the next call. Thank you for everybody for being on the call tonight. Stay safe out there. And since you guys are probably down south, just want to let you know we had 3 or 4 inches of snow today. So you know, you guys don't get to enjoy that.
It was horrible down here. I looked at my phone today when I was in class, and it was 74. It was awful.
Oh my God! How do you survive?
I turned the heat on.
All right, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, Jeff. Good job.
Thank you.